Welcome back to part two of Dr. Lad Santiago's oral history for the Bronx Latino History Project. Today is Wednesday, August 13th, 2025, and I am Pastor Crespo Jr. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well, and thank you so much for having me. Uh,
Awesome, awesome. Would you like to say a few words before we begin?
yes, please. Something I wanted to say last time, but hey, as long as it is said, that's what's important, and perhaps it could be recruited, cut, and placed. But I wanted to thank Dr. Stephen Payne, the director, for being instrumental in having this type of project in existence as part of the Bronx County Historical Society. Teresa Brown, the Chief Administrative Officer, William Roger McCormick, the Director of Education, because it's all about education. And most importantly, El Señor Pastor Crespo Jr.,
Thank you.
who has been uh, just a wonderful uh, influence and also an individual with information because we started our relationship by my seeking information on a particular edifice that existed in the Bronx.
Mhm.
And then it's gone from there. And we had found that we had so much in existence. And he made the offer once he found out that I was entrenched in the Bronx and part of the Bronx. And the Bronx is part of me and I can never escape it. And he said, "Hey, how would you like to participate in this history project?" And I said, "Wow, what an honor." And it's been an honor. And I am so grateful for your graciousness in offering this opportunity. So I just wanted to make that first known. And to anyone that I didn't mention, I please excuse my inability to be able to do so, but thank you also. So we'll go from there. There are a couple of more things I would like to say
Yeah.
before we start with part two. Uh, First, a couple of corrections. Um, when I mentioned about Governor Morris, who was interred in the first, right behind the building that I first dwelled within on 139th Street and St. Anne's Avenue, uh, that he was not the signer of the Declaration of Independence, but rather the signer of the Constitution of the United States, which still prevails as the law of the land, and also as the author of the preamble of the Constitution. And needless to say, when I went to school, I never knew that, and that the gentleman was interred right behind where I lived. Uh, so that's a correction uh, um, that I wanted to make. I also wanted to add that the um, you had asked me where was I born, and I wanted to say that I was born actually at St. Vincent's Hospital,
Mhm.
which is right next to Greenwich Village, which was part of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese, and the nuns that actually spend a great deal of time. It's the third oldest hospital in New York City. Obviously, the first was the Bellevue Hospital, and Bellevue actually provided the medical staff, that is, the doctors that actually served at St. Vincent's Hospital. And I think that's important to know. And I'm going to place it within the context where St. Vincent's Hospital, which is no longer in existence as of 2010, why it was important in our age when 9/11 took place. And we know what happened there, the destruction of buildings and the destruction of life. It was the staff, the medical staff that you saw out on the streets came from St. Vincent's Hospital. And that's its significance within our time.
Mhm.
So we can relate to it, um, from that point of view. So even though it's no longer And it's unfortunate that it was sold in 2010 and it was used by a real estate management agency in order to create apartments and the like in business. And unfortunately, business is good to an extent, except when it comes in and takes away from that which we know to be precious. And to me, St. Vincent's Hospital had a rich history in the same way that Bellevue Hospital had. In fact, the first buggy, the first of you might say ambulance, that horse and buggy ambulance came from St. Vincent's Hospital and obviously was then copied by Bellevue and others. So, they've added to the medical substance of New York, but now they're simply a footnote. And for those who might, with individuals like you who help them look for these archives, uh, they would not know. They'd have to get in contact with you, Senor Crespo. It's like it's lost, and it shouldn't be, but it's part of history now. The third oldest medical hospital institution in New York City. And that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Those two corrections, okay?
Great, great. And we'll begin with the part two, which is focused on your higher education.
That's correct.
Why don't we begin by you explaining to us, as a young man in high school, not out yet, what the 100 Scholars Program was? Could you explain that to us and walk us through it?
Sure, absolutely. And I'm just looking at my notes right here, and just bear with me for a second, because obviously we left off where I had pretty much completed high school. And when you get to that point, you have to make some decisions. And I was very, very fortunate in that I was very attuned and in tune with what was expected of me as a prospective college student. Didn't know what college was in the real sense. I did go to a program at Columbia University uh, uh, during high school, where I took logic on the weekends and got exposed to the university. And as you know, Columbia is one of the top universities in the country and expansive for being an institution located in Manhattan. Um, but I graduated uh, not at the very top of my class, but in the top 1%. And for the largest high school in the world, that was a pretty excellent accomplishment. And for being Boricua, that was a superb accomplishment, because there weren't that many of us. And in fact, if you look at the records, most of our, and unfortunately so, most of our high school students were dropping out of high school, not because they didn't have the intelligence or the drive, but because they didn't have anything that they could relate to. And that's important. It goes back to having role models. And we only had two Boricuas that were teachers. One taught Spanish, and you would have expected at least one there, and that was it. And then we had one guidance counselor, Senor Quinones, who was a guidance counselor at DeWitt. And, he couldn't guide every Boricua that was there, but he did the very, very best he could, given the limitations imposed upon him. So I get to I'm in the 10th, go into the 11th grade, getting ready to go into my senior year of high school. And I get a letter from the City University of New York. And in it, it says, being that you're in the top 100 scholars in your high school, you have been accepted to the City University of New York to start your first year of college at the City University of New York for your 12th grade. So you don't have to go back. You will receive your diploma within a year. But you can start as a freshman. Wow, that was a shocker, okay? And for those of us, again, very few Boricuas Most of the students that received that honor were primarily in the white category. A great percentage of the Jewish students, and then obviously Irish and Italian, and Boricuas and African Americans were at the very bottom of those numbers. Imagine you're 100, they selected the top one, which is essentially the cream of the crop. Okay. And so I got that. So that kind of shook me. I had to make a decision. Is that what I want to do? To start my 12th grade, here it is, 11th grade. And I got to make a decision within a couple of months because they don't give you much time because you got to go be registered and matriculate for the freshman class. And I said, nah, I want to have, look, I attended the largest high school in the world. I want a small college environment. And so I decided, City University of New York, as you're aware, is huge because it brings in students not only within the bounds of New York City, but also beyond New York City. I mean, people came from all over. Obviously, they paid a higher tuition rate if you came unless, the City University of New York had some kind of program with New Jersey, for example, because within that hemisphere, the City College of New York was considered to be very top and has always been. Excellent instructors, history of research, and an institution that goes way, way back. So I decided, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go back for my 12th grade at DeWitt Clinton High School. And then I graduated from there, and I'll allow you to, since I graduated from high school and then had to choose, I'll allow you to ask me the next question.
Yeah. Talk to us about the colleges and universities that you did apply for, and how did that go?
Okay. As I said, I had a criteria, and it was this real simple criteria. I'm not going to go to a university that is large like DeWitt Clinton High School. I mean, DeWitt Clinton High School, I think at the time, had over 7,000 students. That's enough to be a pretty sizable college. Small, albeit maybe moderate in population. It doesn't have 20-something thousand like some of the state colleges, but still significant. And I said, that's not for me. I want a small, personable experience. And I started to look outside. And luckily, we had some students, African American students. Mind you, we as Boricuas, within that hemisphere or within that sphere, we did not exist. I mean, we weren't there. We weren't at these small colleges. We weren't at the large colleges. We were hardly in the City University of New York. There was a smattering, but that was it. Beyond that, nothing. So places like Williams sent out a crew right before the Christmas break, and some African American students who were in attendance at Williams, which is a very fine, fine institution, came to visit and to try to recruit more individuals that were African American and other minorities, okay? Only because the guidance counselor said, hey, let's throw some of these, we're 25% of the student body at DeWitt Clinton. Let's throw some of these few students that we consider to be in the top of the crop in there. And that's when I began the dialogue and was actually invited by some of those students to come and visit Williams. So that's an introduction. Williams College, very renowned, very well respected, and was small. But it was up in Massachusetts, snow country. And there was an African-American student and myself, and another student that decided to go, and this student who was lived in the Bronx, African-American, he said, look, I have access to a car, and we can drive all the way up to Williamstown, Massachusetts. And so he said, you want to come? all you got to do is share the expense, the gasoline. I said, I'm in. So we took and went to Williamstown, Massachusetts, and it was like going from New York City to the tropics in the opposite direction toward the North Pole. And so we got there, and when we got there, it was snowing. I mean, you wouldn't believe it was like a blizzard. And I couldn't see any of the buildings. They had underground tunnels. Okay, they had done this obviously many decades before, where students could get to class subterraneanly. Can you imagine that? And so we went from building to building and got to see the inside of the building, but I never saw the campus because when you looked outside, there was nothing but snow. And it was hot, it was taller than I was. So I was like, nah, I'm not going out there. I mean, at least in New York City, they come by with the plows and they clean the roads and do the sidewalks. Not there. Okay, they got to wait till it melts. They do the minimum. Okay, so we headed back. I got to interview with the dean of admissions, one of the deans of admissions, and I really, really liked it. And I thought that's where I'm going to go to school, even though I didn't see it. And I never heard back when I applied. Didn't hear back from Williams. Now there was still time right before I was to be accepted, or not accepted, either way. So I went to some other colleges, Amherst, in Amherst, Massachusetts, and they did not have a blizzard. By the way, we got caught in that blizzard on our way back, and we couldn't get home. It was somewhere up in a place called something Bridge, as you're coming in, probably a Yonkers, somewhere there. And we had to stop and stay at a auditorium that was set up for emergencies for individuals to pretty much abandon their cars and go there for the night. And so we tried to stick it out, but it got too cold, and we finally gave in and went to the shelter. So that was my experience with Williams College, by the way. It started pretty good, ended pretty bad. And I still was impressed. As first college I had really, truly visited at this point in my life. Amherst College was a wonderful experience. And the Dean Wilson at the time, who had been a historical landmark himself, accepted me on the spot. And it was uncanny, and it was unexpected. But I asked him a question. I said, sir, when can I look forward to hearing from Amherst College as to my, admission or rejection? And he looked at me, and there was applause, and he said, young man, consider yourself accepted to Amherst College. Very competitive place. They accept probably, I'm going to say, about 6% of all the students that apply. And it was like, wow. Now, I knew why I had been probably on the margin of Williams. That was because my scores on the SATs were low, but my grades were high. Okay, so, and it had been traditionally that way. Now you could say maybe he was an overachiever. Who knows? But one thing for sure, English was not my first language, and my knowledge and control of it was not there. So I was at a disadvantage. And I hate to use that word disadvantage, but let's face it, we got to admit it. We were disadvantaged because of the environment we were from, the language that we had, the culture, and so on. It was foreign to this English-speaking Anglo-Saxon environment. And needless to say, we did poorly on the SATs. Right? Not just myself, but others, that were superb students, but were Boricua. We did poorer than African Americans on those tests because obviously they didn't have to deal with the language. It was English from the beginning. So we were at a disadvantage in many respects. And then we didn't come from well-to-do families That is to say, well-to-do in terms of culture, we were there, no doubt. In terms of richness, no doubt as a people. But in terms of economics, we were not there. And our parents could not afford to give us the degree of material attention that other kids would have. So when I went to school, you just know by looking at the clothes they wear and, their conduct and so on. And that could be very debilitating to a young person, a young Boricua male who looks at what's available to him and how, as he compares himself to others. And he says, I just can't compete. I do better by going and get me a job. Let me go. Let me leave this school. What is it affording me anyway? I'm poor. You could see it. Instead of looking out, it was a immediate gratification as opposed to delayed gratification. And that's something that we as a people, our children didn't learn. And we lost so many wonderful children. I saw it in my realm. I saw it. Individuals that had so much promise and couldn't fulfill that promise. So, but I did finally go. I got into the schools that I applied. I rejected the majority of them, and only kept Wesleyan, Williams, and Amherst there in contention. I got accepted on the last day at Williams. It's like they had to think about it. I know what they were doing. They were looking at my board scores, trying to prognosticate how will he respond in this environment? Will he stay and perform? We're talking about absolute isolation in Williamstown, Mass. If you look at it and you ever get to go there, it's like nowhere. It's close to the New York border, New York State. And they probably felt, well, this is a rigorous school, academic school. Wesleyan was already moving toward trying to bring new elements. It had brought in African Americans, but had not brought us in. And then I didn't want to go to Brown up in Rhode Island, Providence, because it was still, I measured it and I said it's still too large. So that left Wesleyan and Amherst, and I actually accepted both of them, which was uncouth, but I couldn't make up my mind, and went to both orientations. And I said, I need to see this college in action before I make up my mind. And Amherst was a wonderful school. And sometimes, you think about it, well, how would it have been if I had gone to Amherst? But I went to Wesleyan, made the best of it, and performed. So that's basically the 100 Scholars Program, and now the colleges. By the way, I attended and received scholarships to be able to attend because I couldn't afford it. My parents couldn't afford it. So,
Well, where'd you decide to go?
Wesleyan University. I went to Wesleyan in Middletown, Connecticut, and and I was a first generation college student, which basically is a coin word for the first in your family to have attended college and have graduated, which I did ultimately. Almost didn't, but we'll talk about that momentarily. And we were what was interesting, we met at the Ford Foundation headquarters in New York City. And Wesleyan had actually invited all of the Boricua students that had been accepted and the one Chicano student who came from Milwaukee, who, by the way, we're still friends to this day.
Got it.
Okay. I lost you.
Don't worry about my video.
I got you. Thank you. And there was he was the only Chicano student there, and we became friends. And we had so much of an influence on him that eventually he married a Boricua, and we're friends to this day. And his daughters, he had two daughters, and one became a attorney, and the other one became uh, went into the humanities and arts and serves as a faculty member at Columbia University in creative writing. So um, that was the very beginning of, and I attended there from 69 to 71, and then 72 to 74.
Got it, got it.
So,
And did you participate in any special programs while you were at Wesleyan?
yes, yes. In fact, there was a student who had been accepted the year before, who knew some of the people at the Ford Foundation. And through the assistance of the Assistant Dean of Admissions, Dean Roberts, uh, they were able to get a Ford Foundation grant to have the first leadership conference, Boricua Leadership Conference at Wesleyan. And by the way, this student who eventually he left, we felt abandoned because we were looking forward. He was supposed to be in I think he had entered the second year when we were entering the first. Uh, Graduated, I mean, didn't graduate, transferred to Yale and, I'm sorry, to Princeton. And then from there, he went on to Yale Law School and eventually became uh, a, a justice of the court system in Puerto Rico, and was there. And then eventually, I lost contact. I think he's retired now. But we had this leadership conference, and we had very prominent individuals come by, educators uh, and other professors and noted celebrities uh, that year. Individuals like Piri Thomas, who was responsible for writing, composing the Down These Mean Streets. And he's a noted uh, writer within Boricua circles, especially mainland. When I say mainland, I'm meaning those that were located here, Boricuas, as part of the diaspora, versus those that were from the island and strictly there. And he grew up in Manhattan, Piri Thomas, and wrote about his personal experiences growing up in the barrio. And so he wrote this Bildungsroman, which is a depiction of his life in that area and the influences it had on him. But it was in novel form. And I got to meet him.
All right. Let's talk about your interaction with Piri Thomas, the author of Down These Mean Streets.
Sure.
Did you meet him?
Yes, I met him. I met him there at the conference because it was a quaint kind of conference in that we had not a really large crowd. And he spoke. We made certain to bring him because, I mean, when he introduced his debut novel, it hit every area within our diaspora. I mean, people knew who he was. I mean, a published novelist, Boricua, mainland Boricua. So we, got him his honorarium. We brought him on down and or up to Connecticut, and he gave a talk on Down These Mean Streets. And he had served time in prison for infractions, criminal infractions that he had committed, paid his time, paid his dues uh, and spoke to us. I spoke to him before the conference. I heard him during the conference, and then immediately after the conference. And fortunately, and this came out, it was serendipitous because he wanted to get back home that night. Well, that night, we stayed talking and talking. It wasn't until about 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. And we said, yeah, we can accommodate you. And the only one at the time that knew how to traverse via car to New York City was me among the students. And we had a university vehicle. So we said, yeah, we'll take you. And it was me and Piri Thomas. There may have been another student, but I actually got to spend a couple of hours talking to him about his life, time in prison, time in the barrio, everything. And it was a one-on-one captive interview. And I thought, wow. And he said something to me that kind of shocked me a little bit. He said, well, you need to write a book. And I'm looking at him. I'm barely 20. And I'm, wondering, write a book? Golly, I've just gotten to college. He said, yeah, you need to write a book at some point. Maybe not right now. And those words stuck with me. And needless to say, I am now an author. So I'm, how things come true. And it
Amazing.
was wonderful.
That is a great story.
Yeah, he was, he didn't realize at the time. And then we lost contact. Eventually, he moved to California, started a life there. Uh, but hey, I'm certain that before I ever spoke to you, and we mentioned this, that you had heard of Piri Thomas, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, he's part of our annals. I mean, you know, and being, in my opinion, the first to serve in that capacity is lasting, you know. Um, so he's in my memories, and I'm very glad that I met him.
Wow,
And what an
glad you
experience.
shared. Now, here in the notes, it says, were you injured your first year at Wesleyan?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. I had an injury, and it was an eye injury, and it really incapacitated me. I couldn't take any of my final exams. So, can you believe that? I had done all my midterms and so on. And my professors, this uh, went out by the dean to uh, all the faculty members, my faculty members, and said, hey, he's been injured. You got to give him incompletes because, you know, there's nothing he can do. He can't read the materials to test, and he shouldn't be partly incapacitated because that places him at a disadvantage with other students. He should be fully restored to the best of his ability to then commence to take his final exams. And I couldn't disagree with our dean. So I finished out the term with incompletes. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
So, but I did improve, uh, and they gave me all the time that I needed, and eventually I completed my exams, and um, I also got to attend uh, Harvard during the summer. I had been accepted to the Harvard Health Careers Program, and it was trying to attract individuals of uh, back then we would use the word disadvantaged backgrounds. Um, Frankly, it's an inappropriate term because in many ways we had more advantages. We had seen more of the world, but maybe not enough of the academic world. Uh, but went there. I took courses offered by uh, the faculty of Harvard Medical School, uh, and even entertained transferring to Harvard. Uh, but the faculty, I'm sorry, the deans of admissions, when they reviewed my record, said, "Hey, we'd love to have you because, the semester before you had performed superbly, but you have incompletes. And if you can get these incompletes completed, then you can apply. And we would be inclined to offer you admissions." And when I finally went back, I took a year off, interestingly enough, and I got too captivated by what I was doing in Boston, in Cambridge and in Boston, that I didn't pay any of my attention to any of my incompletes until the very, very end of that year, and then I completed them all. But then I could have applied, but chose not to apply, and I was going into my what would have been my third year. And at one point I even thought, nah, I don't want to get uh, I don't want to get involved in anything else. I don't even know whether I'm going to return to college. I was somewhat dismayed, somewhat forlorn, and I didn't. Uh, that year as I was finishing, and it wasn't until June, July, with the advice of a lot of very kind people who said, "Listen, you have a promising future. Just You just need to swallow like you've done before and chuck it up and just go back to college." And I still probably had maybe one course at that point in time to complete. And they said, "Just go back and finish up." And so I returned. So, yeah, it was devastating. I thought I still have a scar. I thought I was going to lose an eye. That's how devastating of a injury it was, Senor Pastor.
Wow. So talk to us about, did you contribute to starting any student organizations at Wesleyan?
Yes, and thank you. In fact, in that first year, we started um, the organization Ahua Campos, uh, which was the Hispanic. And when I said Hispanic, we're very strict in our terminology and definition. Hispanic back then, or Latino, meant Boricua and Chicano. Uh, but we made space for others that could have been considered and were considered as students for admission. And we started this organization to create some cohesiveness among this segment of the student body. And there were at the time about 7 of us. The Chicano would have been 8. But he decided to leave after the first year and head back to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So that just left the Boricua students. But as you can tell, the name Ahua, which is a Mexican American, actually a Mexican war cry, that was, I believe, started back in the times of Zapata, during the time of Zapata and Pancho Villa. And then Campos was the name of our illustrious and leader, Don Pedro Albizu Campos. And it was a way for us to meet the university straight on as a cohesive entity to represent our desires and our ideals, because along the way we heard that they were going to eliminate quote unquote Latino admissions, the admissions of Boricuas and the admission of Chicanos and Native Americans, because we invited the Native Americans that were there from out west, Papagos, Opis, Navajos, uh, to our group and to represent us, but they were going to get rid of us, and they decided that they were going to make this a black and white experience. In other words, they had accepted African Americans, but they decided to renege on accepting us, Boricuas, Chicanos, and Native Americans. So, hey, we don't have time for them, and our resources will only allow for African Americans. So the African Americans had an organization called UYAMA, an African, Western African term. And we had the Ahua Campos organization to represent us. And the Native Americans had a difficult time from the West coming together in a tribal sense, and really pushing for an organization that would reveal. But they did some, not to the same degree as the Boricua and Chicano students.
Yeah, talk
Okay,
to us. Go ahead.
please, just ask me.
Yeah, I was wanting to know if you attended any different programs during your early years at the university.
Yeah, what happened also, just to add, after I came back, taking off that year, and I had been to Harvard, I came back and I was surprised to find, by the way, that there was a dormitory, a house, just like Uyama had the Malcolm X house there on campus. We had La Casa de Don Pedro Albizu Campos. Um, and and it was a great house, a great place to have lectures and so on. And it was a dormitory as well, so the students got to talk to one another. So the university did that, but then, they wanted to. They were, if you will, influenced to expand that. And I was gone that year. So when I got back, there was the Casa de Don Pedro Albizu Campos, which we had written to the university to construct or to establish. And we that academic year was wonderful, because I saw that, hey, perhaps I can finish college, because I felt like a junior. You're now in the upper half of your college career, or your undergraduate college career. And so it didn't seem something that was so formidable and unreachable that I couldn't complete college. And so I approached it with all the zeal that I could. With regard to programs, I think, you're probably referring to the year that I took off, right before I returned, that I just mentioned. I got involved with a community program that is a public health program in Dorchester, Mass. We did some studies with regard to communicable diseases. I was really, there was a newly formed Boricua community there in Dorchester, Mass, and it was growing. A lot of Boricuas moving there from like Connecticut, and they were trying to make a life. And so we did studies in communicable diseases, to stay on top of the needs, bringing in family health care with physicians and nurses that could serve that community. So that was a wonderful experience. And that's what led me to the health manpower. I said, hey, there's a need for Boricua health manpower. Here's a community, doesn't have a doctor. New York was years in advance by comparison. the National Boricua Health Organization came about. I helped to form it, establish it, ran it. That started that first year that I was there. Uh, at the time, there was the National Chicano Health Organization, Health Manpower Organization. We had the National Boricua Health Organization, and their director talked to me and said, "Listen, man, you need to get involved with the AAMC, the American Association of Medical Colleges. You need to get involved with the National Institutes of Health because that's where we're getting involved." So they were extremely, I mean, he was just, and it was fortuitous that he was as open and gracious as he was as the director there, inviting us, their compatriots, if you will, from the Northeast, to get involved in these national programs. And so I was accepted to be on a steering committee as the director of the National Boricua Health Organization to represent Boricuas in the first health manpower conference that was eventually held in Chicago. And I served as as one of the key individuals. And then I brought a couple of other individuals that were Boricua, a couple of ladies that were into social work, and then also served as a consultant to the Office of Health Manpower Opportunity of the National Institutes of Health under Dr. George Blue Spruce, who at the time was the only Native American dentist in the United States, which was wonderful because, and they had this other gentleman whose name I don't recall right now, who was Chicano, who was serving as an assistant to him. And I was actually asked to serve as a consultant for the National Institutes of Health to oversee, to visit these various sites, among them some universities who had applied for these health manpower opportunity grants to help with health manpower, that is to say, with students who wanted to undergo training, wanted to undergo an education at the undergraduate level to get them prepared for allopathic medical school, dental schools, and the like. And I went to Alaska to review a program in Anchorage at the University of Anchorage in Alaska, where I got to see for the first time the Inuit community, and also which is a Native, American community there, the Eskimo community. And it was during the summer, not during the snow season. So that was a wonderful experience. I came to South Carolina and came to a college down here. I did about 3 programs that we visited, had to write reviews, our commentaries, whether they should be accepted, and how that program would be valuable to increasing health manpower of that specific minority community. So it was a wonderful experience. And then I returned to Wesleyan after that year and found I was given the opportunity to join what was then the Native American House. There was a Native Americans House by the time I got back. So, and we had Opis and Papago. We had um, Navajo, Hopi, and Papago, and I believe we had perhaps one representative of the Apache tribe, but they were all Western tribes. Um, and I became a member of their community there at the Native American house, obviously because of my Taino connection. It was very easy to establish that. And then finished. One of my close buddies there was a Navajo. He was a year behind in terms of school. And then I finished uh, in 74 with a bachelor's in molecular biology and a minor in literature. The major was in molecular biology. And then I returned. When I finished, I returned to Harvard to finish up that summer my pre-medical sciences. And that's what occurred.
Yeah, before you graduated, I mean, did you work while you were in college?
Oh, yes, yes. You know, I did a number of things while I was in college. Um, I mentioned what I did with the Office of Health Manpower Opportunity. That was work. I actually was remunerated for doing the consultations. Um, I, I served uh, the let me see. Uh, I worked at the university. You're asking me during the time that I was in college, correct?
Correct.
Okay. During the time I was in college, I worked in the community at Middletown during the summer, doing some work with the community action program. I also worked as uh, he called them assistant librarian staff, where I worked at the science library, cataloging, and doing all sorts of chores with regard to making sure, because the library, they had just built a new science library and it needed to be fitted. And so I was there working with books mainly, cataloging, uh, categorizing, you name it. So I got to do that as well. Um, that's, the summers, um, I didn't really have a clear summer. I think I may have taken that summer and worked in a community action program uh, at in Middletown, Connecticut, until the new semester, my senior year semester, came about. Um,
Now,
is
after
that
graduation from Harvard University to complete your pre-med studies, where'd you go after that experience?
I tell you what, that was a very interesting period. So, Pastor, um, it was, the country, it was during the time of the Jimmy Carter administration. And I have nothing uh, negatively to say about President Jimmy Carter. He has been a great president, a great representative, humanitarian representative. But at the time that he was president, he appeared not to have grips of the economy. And so we descended as a nation. And I remember gasoline prices just going downhill, I mean, going uphill and never stopped climbing to the point where there was a gas shortage, for example, in the Bronx. And there were lines. I mean, these lines were just tremendous to get gas. You had to get in there about 4:30 in the morning to try to get some gas, and there was already a line. Some people just stayed all night and slept in their cars. Um, but I don't think there's been, in terms of humanitarian endeavors, there's been a better president before or since, um, with the exception of Johnson. that, with the exception,
I
please
hope
hold
not
one
Andrew
sec.
Johnson.
Uh,
That was a joke. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
yeah, no, I said with the exception of President Johnson, who was responsible for signing the Bill of Rights, during the civil rights movement, Jimmy Carter has done more to spread goodwill throughout the world than any other president. There's none. And in my opinion, after you become president, and you've gone through that whole process, uh, it's what you do afterwards that counts. And what he did afterwards was tremendous. But during the time I was there, uh, in New York City, I graduated from college. I had my degree, and I couldn't find a job. Senor Crespo, I could not find a job. So I knew one thing. I knew how to drive, uh, and I knew some people. And at the time, gypsy cab driving was where a lot of um, individuals who could drive and wanted to make $1 and could afford a car, they would purchase their own place. That is their own vehicle. Um, Different than the yellow cab, which was a medallion cab, and it's found right in the hood. Uh, you get out there, you get your own car, you rig it up, everything, and it doesn't look like a yellow cab, and it doesn't pretend that it's a yellow cab, but you have a sign right on your windshield off the visor, facing toward the outside lit, that says, "Hey, on duty," you know, and people knew in the Bronx, in Spanish Harlem, in the South Bronx, in Spanish Harlem, and in Black Harlem, uh, they recognized the gypsy cab. And so I went and got a gypsy cab. I bought a car and rigged it up and took it to places, and I found myself a job. Why? Because I couldn't get one because the unemployment rate in New York City was 12%, and we had a national stagflation. Meant that the inflation rate had gone as high as it could go. So our economy had stymied. I mean, it was horrible. And as I mentioned, we then faced gas prices. So uh, that was my experience there, and I did that to make a living, and I was able to make a living. Uh, I went to places that nobody else would go to. Very dangerous, uh, but I know they have to have gypsy cabs in New York. Is that correct?
I don't think so.
They don't have any.
Well, you got Uber, you got Lyft, everything's Uber and Lyft and those types.
Got you. Well, we preceded them because nobody would go to the South Bronx. The yellow cabs would not traverse the South Bronx. They would go to the hotels in Manhattan, the very rich hotels,
Mhm.
because a friend of mine, her father, owned a medallion. It cost him an incredible amount of money. I'm going to say close to 100,000 at the time. And we were the only ones that would go to places like Spanish Harlem and Black Harlem. And I drove all those areas. Um, and every so often you'd hear of a fatality
Mm.
where um, somebody got in the cab and tried to get some money. If it was easy, because they didn't have a barrier, I had a barrier on mine. I put a steel barrier that they made for you, and they installed it and so on, that could withstand, a 45 bullet. Okay, and they had this plexiglass, and the plexiglass was not regular plexiglass; it was bulletproof plexiglass. So, I did that. So that deterred anyone that may have had intentions of doing something while in the cab. But I had people that, would take you from one part of the Bronx, let's say, to Manhattan, and two or three would get in the car, and they had enough money to pay, and then they would open the door and run out, and they leave you stranded, and you did all this work and used your car and the gas, and you know, it was quite an experience. But hey, it gave me funds that I needed to survive, make a living. Um, couldn't get any other kind of job, and here I was with a college degree.
Wow,
So, I went through that. It wasn't easy. Uh,
got it. And when did you return to your graduate studies?
well, I did that. Uh, within 2 years, I said, "Listen, I can't keep doing this, right?" I went to some really decent schools, got a decent education, can't find a job. I need to find, and I was an entrepreneur. Okay. I was. If you look at me, I was a shoe shine boy. I didn't work for a company, uh, except when I was working for Miles Shoes as a third man, uh, a shoe sales clerk. I got a check from them, but otherwise, I was a entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur when I had the gypsy cab. Uh, So here it is. I said, man, I'm going to have to do something to get some training to be able to put out a shingle. Uh, and that's when I decided I was going to go to uh, onto medical school, and uh, and my interests were very, very specific, uh, very uh, in alignment with some of my beliefs and also with my cultural values. Uh, so, being as introspective as I was, I decided that I was uh, going to go become a physician, and got my first professional degree, doctoral degree, in '79, and then went from there to do a stint.
Got it.
Um,
Before we move
yeah,
on, what
yeah, yeah.
specialisms in medicine did you study and practice?
Preventive medicine, okay, and did received was conferred the diplomate in preventive medicine, uh, and also medical thermography, uh, integrative medicine. I did a smattering of different things because my interests were wide. They were very broad indeed. And so I'd do something for a while, and I'd say, man, I need to add to this because I've mastered it or felt like I had mastered it. I need something else to enrich my mind and to learn more. And so that was uh, pretty much the edict, uh, the ideal that I abided by. Um, and so I just kept learning more and adding more. So I settled in practicing primarily practice functional medicine uh, and preventive medicine, uh, and did that for quite a number of years.
Wow, okay. Yeah, while in medical school, did you hold any leadership positions in medical societies?
Yeah, interestingly, I I didn't really, uh, uh, not while I was uh, a student, but thereafter, I did, because you get involved in clinical practice and you're seeing patients constantly. You're not working, 30, 40 hours a week. You're working beyond that, 50 to 60 hours a week because, you have individuals that need your knowledge and your training to be able to help them. So that doesn't leave time for much else. However, I did get involved in various uh, societies uh, for example, in functional medicine, I got involved. In medical thermography, I got involved with societies. In serving nutrition, clinical nutrition, serving in the capacity of uh, helping to train others and helping to um, keep the profession or the discipline moving forward. So I did that, and served as chairman for several and as president of various academies. So and that was good because that developed your leadership uh, in areas outside of your clinical practice.
And when did you graduate medical school?
Back in 19, oh golly, graduated from college in 74, 79.
Okay.
Did my 4-year stint, and then went on to uh, preventive medicine and functional medicine.
Got it. Got it. Now, when did you begin studying creative writing formally?
Yes, I've always had a love for literature, and it's kind of interesting because remember I mentioned that I met Piri Thomas,
Mhm.
and he um, challenged me in a way. He said, "You got to write a book." Well, you can't write a book if you don't take out the time to write one. And so that kind of stayed in my mind. Uh, in fact, when I was at Wesleyan, all the demands, anything that was done in writing to the administration on behalf of the Acohua Campus organization was done by me. I was the writer. My friend, who's still my friend today after over 50 years, he says uh, he would call me el autor, because I had a command of the English language at the time. Uh, so so uh, um, so you read, you learn, you read, you learn, uh, and this stays in your mind. And finally, um, after about 10, 15 years of studying the novel, because I loved the novel and I loved the uh, modernist, postmodernist period of literature, I decided, hey, I'm going to embark on a graduate program in creative writing. And so about 2005, uh, I matriculated at National University, which was the only university I had a family. I was raising a family, and trying to find an online program was almost impossible. But National had one of the first, if not the first, Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. And it also had a Master of Fine Arts in digital cinema production. And so that's when I started, 2005 to 2006. In fact, I attended both programs because my wife was attending the 2000. She had decided to do the uh, Master of Fine Arts in digital cinema.
Got it.
And she said to me, uh, and I told her, that's a good program for you. And she said, well, I don't know that much about film because I'm the one that introduced her to film back with Star Wars. Okay, she hardly ever attended a movie until I enticed her, being from New York. Hey, movies were a part of my footprint, if you will. And so she entered that, and she said, I let her, but I can already tell I'm going to need some help. Why don't you come in with me? I said, I'm already taking a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. She said, yeah, but you know so much, it won't be that difficult for you. And so I entered the Master of Fine Arts in digital cinema production, and I didn't know how, man, I was already, you're trying to run a practice up to a point. I had reduced the number of hours. I'm doing the creative arts creative writing. And now I'm adding another program, just as rigorous, and in some respects, more rigorous. In fact, it was more rigorous because I already had studied creative writing on my own. And I felt like I had a reasonably decent command of the subject matter. But when I went into digital cinema production, that was, man, that was like a whirlwind. And I'm glad that I did do it because I was able to help her with the program. And we got through. I can't recall now how many students started in that program. But I'm going to say it was probably 48. And about 15 of us finished, if that tells you something.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, the director was just, you would not believe how difficult. Everybody said that he was so, so very difficult. He was a child of the early, his grandfather was in early film. And so he knew this stuff just, and he had a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from University of California, Riverside, I believe. And, he put the pressure on us, but I already knew how to study. So it was just a matter of sticking with it and my wife sticking with it. And we were one of them. I'm going to say probably 15 students that graduated.
Now,
And not
which
all
degree
of us.
what
I'm
degree
sorry,
did you get? What graduate degree did you get? Creative
I
writing or cinema?
both.
Both?
I
Okay.
got, yes, I
Or
got the,
I meant digital cinema. All right, great. Creative writing and digital cinema production.
yes, I had the Master of Fine Arts degree in creative writing, had to write a dissertation, uh, and in fact, hold one moment. Go get me the blue book on digital cinema production. Should be right over there. I mean, not digital cinema, creative writing. Anyway, and then the other Master of Fine Arts was in digital cinema,
All right.
and so I had to have two dissertations at two different times, um, and received distinctions, uh, which are listed on my degree certificate. And I had to write a novel for the creative writing, and that's the novel right there.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
And
A
as you can
course for
tell, it's pretty
certainty.
thick. That was the dissertation, by the way, requirement to be able to graduate from the creative writing program. And and then I graduated this another one, both of which can be accessed through the National University Library, which is located in Santiago, California. Uh, its primary call to fame is that uh, it, I think, turns out more instructors, that is, teachers, for elementary school, middle school, and high school than any other institution in California. It's a lot of people don't even, they have their headquarters in San Diego, they have their campus, and I had to, uh, for the digital cinema program, I had to go to California, both my wife and I and my son, to do a mini internship, of which part of it we had to go to Hollywood and receive lectures and so on. But I did get, in answer to your question, 2 degrees. I did graduate successfully with distinction, and my Master of Fine Arts in Digital Cinema um, also the academic department also noted it as being an honors thesis. So I was very I was very pleased that I finished, especially when you're one of 15,
Mm.
or thereabouts. Uh, could have been 12 of us that finished. I mean, it was a grueling, Senor Crespo. It was like this guy, um, there were so many complaints by students because he was just so tough. Uh, but hey, I did okay. I knew how to study, and I had studied, and my wife had studied. So, and my son, that was his master's of fine arts because he had graduated with a theater degree from Brevard College. So, you know, uh, it was quite an experience. So I had 2 degrees from there as well.
Wow. Wow.
Excuse me.
Did you undergo further graduate studies at the doctoral level?
Yes, yes, I did. And as you know, the Master of Fine Arts is different than an MA. An MA is a step upward. The Master of Fine Arts is considered, if you look it up and look at its definition, it is considered a terminal degree. That is the terminal degree it's like the PhD for the arts. Okay. And by that time, I had 2 of them. And then I decided, man, I'm a glutton for punishment. I wanted to study some more to get a greater mastery of the language. Uh, and I uh, applied and was accepted at at um, the University of Wales, which later changed its name to Bangor University because it was located in Bangor. And many of the University of Wales branches throughout Wales, which, as you know, is in Great Britain, um, decided to go to be independent to a degree. And that was imposed by the University of Wales itself, by their federal government, wherein they stated, look, uh, you need to have your own budgets and so on. We're talking schools that have been around for over 100 years.
Okay.
By the way, the answer to that is yes, with regard to the Doctor of Philosophy. But I just want to mention real quickly my MFA in creative writing was a literary fiction novel of which I've shown you here, A Quest for Certainty, and which is served in part as a basis for my debut novel, which we will talk about in part 3. And the digital cinema production MFA, I did a dissertation which was entitled The History, Theory, Interpretation, and Praxis of Cinema, the Evolution of an Artist. And it's all about that whole experience that we underwent. And that was part of the requirements. But in addition to that, we had to do a documentary film. And I did the documentary film. In fact, all 3 of us that were there did a documentary film on different aspects of the Catawba Native American nation, which is located not far from here in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Which, by the way, if you come down here, you'll see on I-85, where right in North Carolina, they're building now a Catawba casino, which is huge. They finally got in alignment. It's one of the tribes that had a difficult time. They were separated, divorced from the Bureau of Indian Affairs after they had been recognized for years. And that's a whole different political arena and monster with the Department of, from Bureau of Indian Affairs and recognition of the tribes. But it was all about the documentary on the Catawba Indian nation's attempt to regain federal recognition from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. It was entitled Izwa, the Catawba's Path to Redemption. So, and I had already done this and had written a book for my creative writing. And then I went on to do the Doctor of Philosophy degree, as I mentioned, University of Wales in Bangor, Wales. Did that. My first degree there was that I started with was the Master of Philosophy in English and Comparative Literature. And then my PhD, which ultimately became entitled an English Literature, a survey of American multicultural literature with an emphasis on American Hispanic literature and the causes for its exclusion from the American literary canon, with a critical reflection of the USA Boricua creative artifact, A Path Unknown. So not only did I have to, for the PhD, write about the conditions of Boricua literature and its lack of recognition and presence in the American literary canon, but then I wrote a book of a different title. And what I did is I took off from the Quest for Certainty, which I had done with MFA, and came from a different slant and added and embellished to the point where it was a different rendition, a different project altogether. And then ultimately, those two contributed to my first novel, and we'll talk about that again in part 3. I graduated in 2019. Yes.
No, I was going to ask you, when did you graduate the University of Wales?
Yeah, let me tell you what happened. I did not graduate from the University of Wales. Was there for 9 years. And I could tell you that every year practically that I was there, I felt like this was the wrong decision to have gone even for the PhD. You don't find writers in literary fiction today that have PhDs. They're very rare. I'm one of those that's among them. I can think of Jhumpa Lahiri, great Indian writer. Wrote a book, The Namesake, as a novel. She's written a few novels, but her call to fame was what's it called? Maladies. Interpreter of Maladies. And interestingly enough, she gets a Pulitzer for it. First book out, series of stories about immigrant families from India. And, I, essentially felt that, here is this Indian writer who also is a PhD, graduated, I think, originally from Barnard at Columbia University and then went to Boston University and got her PhD. But there aren't that many. And here I was thinking, golly, what have I done? I made a mistake. 9 years, and there's no promise, because every year my supervisor changed. Senor Crespo, every year.
Uh-huh.
And when you're studying for your PhD hangs on the relationship that you have with your supervisor. He or she is your mentor. Now, every time I had my mentor, they disappeared and got replaced. And that's a no-no in graduate studies. In fact, most students who lose their graduate studies supervisor for the PhD, when their supervisor goes, they go with them. In other words, if they transfer to another university, that student transfers as well. And the supervisor, mentor, says, hey, I want this student accepted into the school, and you automatically get accepted into the new university that they have enrolled with and have joined. And this was happening left and right. And my original supervisor, who I wanted to go with, had come to the United States, had enrolled as a faculty member, and in fact, as a dean of the Honors College at the institution he went with, but they didn't accept graduate students. And so that left me out on a limb. And so we had so much of a high faculty turnover rate. The school abandoned its creative writing focus. And on top of that, we had a couple of individuals that were affiliated in the faculty and supervisory capacity that were actually very insensitive to diversity. And my work had to do with diversity. And so I said, look, I'm doing well enough, but obviously every faculty member, this is what happens, Senor. The new supervisor comes in and says, well, I've read your stuff. I want you to do it my way. So you go and you perform and you do it their way. And then they leave and the new supervisor says, oh, you got to start over again. You got to do it this way. So this was constantly occurring. So I finally said, hey, man, I've had enough. After 9 years, I said, there's a lack of consistency, and I stated this to the university, and left in good standing. And I have a letter to that effect that I left in good standing. And then I went with European American University almost immediately, and joined their student body and got my, it was called all but dissertation. I had everything. Okay, I had finished my graduate studies, all but dissertation. The viva voce, they call it there in England, which your viva voce is like Latin for live voice when you defend your thesis. And within 2 years, I was able to get my degree. I had one consistent supervisor, and they loved the work that I had done. So I'm very fortunate in that regard.
What degrees did you obtain there?
I obtained the MPhil, which is a degree that you don't see a lot of. It's called the Master of Philosophy degree, but I think Columbia University offers the Master of Philosophy degree. There's several other colleges, but we offer here primarily the Master of Arts. Master of Philosophy is a little bit higher. And then I got my PhD, which is the Doctor of Philosophy degree. And my Master of Philosophy, as I said, was in English and Comparative Literature. And my PhD was in English literature and creative writing.
Wow. Wow. Are you working on any other doctoral educational programs?
Oh, golly. I did a stint in, that's a good question. Give me one moment to simply look at my notes, make sure that I have page number 3. Help me a moment. Oh, here it is. Just bear with me.
Of course.
Yeah, I even did a stint for a short while in with a theology degree, a Doctor of Divinity, Doctor of Theology degree, and now I have I've embarked on receiving a doctorado, which is in Spain. They use, in some of the Latin American countries, they use the term doctorado as opposed to PhD, but it's essentially the PhD. Okay, and in fact, it when they confer it upon you, they confer it as a PhD. And I'm in the process of qualifying for el doctorado from Complutense University of Madrid in Madrid, Spain, because it's in keeping with what I wrote on English literature, a survey of American multicultural literature with an emphasis on American Hispanic literature. So they do offer a program in their literature department in pedagogy. So, I just wanted to round out.
Mhm.
I've always been this kind of individual. I did that in healthcare and, rounded out what I felt was the kind of program. I don't believe in absolute regimentation where you compartmentalize yourself to the point where, uh, you know, it's so restrictive, but rather expand within the various, it's like Rami. They're little branches off a main branch, right? And I've always been that type of individual because you learn more and you become more conversed in in general, and you're like a specialist, but with a flair for generalism. So you can touch on this, you can touch on that. And I applied the same to literature. So that's the way I've approached this. But my area of specialty, you would say, if you had to get it pinpointed in literature, as you could see in the titles of these theses, um, was literary fiction. Okay, so in my dissertation, I was looking at literary fiction because, as I have mentioned, there's literary fiction and everything else. The rest is genres, but literary fiction is in a category all by itself. Um, so that's what I've done. But yeah, that's going to be the last endeavor in academics. I've done enough.
Well,
It's
in your
yes,
academic schooling, but are you currently serving in a professorial teaching position capacity?
yes. I am serving as a professor and fellow in literature, uh, and actually in several capacities. Uh, you know, in English comparative literature and creative writing. Uh, but I'm also serving as a professor in the sciences, uh, in the healthcare sciences, which is a broader term than just medical, in the healthcare sciences as an integrative preventive medicine and nutritional medicine. So, and that includes preventive medicine, obviously. Uh, so, I'm there in a sister institution. I'm serving in uh, in religious studies. Uh, so, yes, I am, and I'm hoping, and I should be hearing soon that I will be accepted as a distinguished um, fellow and professor uh, with the Stephen M. Gill professor, who was as you'll see in part 3, was my mentor, one of my mentors in writing. He was a creative writer. He was a literary fiction, poetry, and his focus was on peace. He was originally from India, and uh, he was my mentor, and hopefully they'll give me the title of distinguished, um, the Stephen M. Distinguished Professor. Stephen M. Um, oh golly, my mind is playing tricks on me. Gill, Gill. You can find him if you do a search on Google. The Stephen M. Gill Distinguished Professor. So if that happens, I'll be elated. That's about as much as I'd want to. uh, you know, in memory of him, he was a very, very fine gentleman, was also nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature.
Wow.
So didn't get it, but, to be nominated, you have to have the attention of the proper powers that be. And just, he was interested. I'll just say this quickly. He was um, a child of the struggle for uh, the recognition of India to be an independent nation from England when that took place, and Gandhi. And his parents were up in, do you remember what else? I can't recall right now, but I'll have the name exactly. It's a small province that's north of India, but was bordered by Pakistan and India. And they came in, obviously, when there was the independence, a move for the independence of Pakistan. And they ravished that whole area. And so he saw things that no child should have ever seen. The heinous crimes of murder of children and families that were Hindu by those that were Muslim that came to that area because they took half of the city. And he says he can remember his parents, who were reasonably well established as Indian businessmen. They had a factory to make badminton bats, that they use for badminton. I guess that's what they call it, right? That they play out in the field, similar to like softball, right? Where you hit it.
No, that's another
Not
sport.
badminton.
But I forget the British sport. Yeah, I'm glad Anglo-colonialism didn't extend their sports to us.
Oh yes, yes. And, his family had they were quite well established, and that was destroyed. So he saw his parents' destruction, and then eventually they moved out of there and went to England. So anyway, and he was my mentor. Um, and as I said, commentary, but his whole focus in writing, which is interesting. You are a child of your upbringing, was the issue of peace among people in the world. So we hit it off. I mean, I totally agreed with him. There should be peace within our human race and not war, but obviously not everybody has subscribed to that ideal, as we know. So I hope that I pretty much answer.
Yeah, you really great. Did you want any parting words for part two before we end the interview?
Well, I want to thank you again for being so gracious, because it gives me an opportunity to speak about my life in very clear and concrete terms. It brings to the fore issues that may be tangential at times to my actual life, but you get a feeling for the time, you get a feeling for our environment as a nation, and sometimes beyond. You get a side of our quest, for example, of Boricuas, to try to right the wrongs and to try to, if you will, get a little footnote at this point in time of who we are and what we are, and you'll see it more in the literature that we'll touch on part three. And speaking about like Wesleyan and all these colleges, which was foreign to me because there was no one that I could talk to that went to college in my neighborhood. And we left, as I mentioned, my mom and I, when she walked into an elevator in the projects on the 7th floor. She took the elevator and started taking it down. And she didn't realize that there was this squish of sound where every time she moved, hadn't noticed that she had gone into a puddle of blood. And when she saw it, it was like she was screaming, because she had never seen that. I mean, it's one thing to see it in a movie or in a TV program, but to experience it. And that was like, that's it. That's the end of it. We're leaving. So, very fortunate that my mom at that, we're talking about a woman that had an elementary school education and that was it, but had the insight to know that this was not a place for us to stay. It was time to leave and make that decision. And I tell you, she made it. It was done that weekend, and the following weekend, we were gone. Uh, Obviously, that was not the place to be because a future event could be you. And I had mentioned in the last event that there was a gentleman that died as a result of that stabbing. So, I've been very fortunate. If I had to select again, what life would I want? Okay, I would say I'd do it no different. I've learned a lot. I've been exposed to a lot, uh, and I still look forward to seeing a lot more. So that's where I am, Pastor. It's been a good life. If that same question could be asked of you or anybody else. If you had to select again, you might make a little change here and a little change there, but sometimes you feel like, hey, I couldn't have been enriched by any other experience the way I've been enriched through this experience. So I
Awesome.
think that's it. And thank you. Thank you. I
No,
appreciate it.
thank you. And I look forward to part three.
Definitely.
All
I'll
right.
be there. Lord willing, I'll be there. Okay.
Awesome. Awesome. I bid you a farewell for today and until our next interview.
Thank you so much. You have a great day. And I appreciate everything that you've done and that the Historical Society has done.
Thank
Okay.
you so much.
You're welcome.